The next chapter takes us to the scene where our main protagonist, Joonseo, was madly dashing through the forest. Our main character was fraught with remorse about being late on such an important day. A young woman beside a man equipped with a huge shield greeted the frantic Joonseo. The woman was a C-rank hunter named Kim Jimin. Her class was a fighter and was known as the Dawn Guild's melee fighter. Beside her was a man called Lim Du-won, a C-rank defender and also known as the Dawn Guild's main tanker. We finally get to see Shin Johnson's stat. He's currently a D-rank support, and his current class is called a creator. Du-won said in a light-hearted manner that he was just kidding, and Joonseo wasn't even late. Whereas, Jimin patted him on the back, trying to allay his discomfort, and told him that Hyunwoo and Doyoon were already inside. Ha! This is bad, Joonseo muttered to himself. He was overly anxious about the fact that it had already been 3 months since he entered Do-won Guild, but he was already late for his very first dungeon raid. As the trio headed to the portal leading to the dungeon, Joonseo straightened his back and did his best to boost his morale. Buck it up. This is my first dungeon raid as a support. I have to prove that I'm useful. Joonseo cheered himself up. Inside the dungeon, B-rank assassin Doyoon approached Joonseo and asked him if it was his first dungeon raid. He was the guild master of the Dawn Guild and one of its melee fighters just like Jimin. Joonseo said yes and added that he had already been in the dungeon as a helper quite a few times in the past. Doyoon said that since it's his first time, he should share some pointers with him. He advised Juzio that since supports don't necessarily have the ability to fight like hunters, he needed to be more aware of his positioning. Too close and he might end up embroiled in the fight. Too far and he might lose their protection. Doyoon emphasized the importance of keeping a good distance to keep himself safe. Finally, he reminded Joonseo to create a dagger for him as soon as he gave the signal. When Doyoon said that it shouldn't be difficult, Joonseo begrudgingly agreed. He then asked Doyoon hesitantly if that's all he needed to do, or if he didn't need to create another weapon aside from the dagger. Doyoon said he's the only one who needed an extra weapon, and he stated that this dungeon was considered easy, and since this was his first dungeon raid as a support, there was no need to overexert himself. The conversation between the two halted when a man wielding a staff caught their attention. His name was Lee Hyunwoo, a C-rank mage and Dawn Guild's long-range attacker. Hyunwoo said he's sensing mana, signifying the presence of monsters in the vicinity. The party pumped themselves up and got ready for battle. Do-won took the front line as the main tank and led the party. When Doyoon asked Hyunwoo about the mana, Hyunwoo confirmed the presence of 3 small manas and one that was powerful enough to be considered a boss monster. This remark gave Do-won a pause and made him furrow his brows tightly in contemplation. He was baffled by the unusual appearance of a boss in their current location. He told the rest of the team that he would deal with the boss and the others should take care of the rest. He turned around and asked Joonseo, who was lagging behind, what's the fastest speed he could create a dagger. Joonseo responded that it would take about 20 seconds, but it could only hold up for less than a minute. Doyoon beamed at him and told him to start making the dagger right away. He confidently said that it would only take 40 seconds for him to defeat the boss. All of a sudden, 3 blue and 1 purple reptilian monsters with crystal ores protruding from their bodies appeared and were running at full speed toward their direction. These monsters were called Crystal Lizard with a D risk level. These monsters grew on mana stones that are found in dungeons. Their appearance and ability varied depending on the kind of mana consumed. The appearance of these monsters made Do-won and Jimin both excited to engage in battle. Do-won took the first step in confronting the monsters. He gathered his aura in his lower extremities and swung his huge shield and smashed it to the ground. The monsters took a hit and were flung away due to the impact. Next, Jimin, wielding her weapon, leapt forward and threw a powerful punch at one of the reptiles. She somersaulted and the blue crystal lizard took a devastating blow and became incapacitated, while Jimin perfectly landed on the ground. Just then, she noticed there was a movement behind her, so she turned around and got confronted with the scene of the crystal lizards recovering after being temporarily paralyzed. She also noticed that the two blue crystal lizards were already rushing towards the rest of the team. The lizards appeared to be regenerating at an astonishing rate. Jimin shouted at the top of her lungs and warned the team to watch out for the two monsters heading their way. Meanwhile, Dongua was already on guard and had his shield up ready to defend Hyunwoo, while the latter was gathering up his mana to release his magic spell. After a while, Hyunwoo had already completed conjuring a series of fireballs that shot through the incoming monsters. The fire spread like wildfire, and the blue crystal lizards were finally defeated. Hyunwoo and Dongua emerged triumphant, while Joonseo was awed by the flawless way the guild members executed their attacks. He was left reeling from the event that had just transpired. "What about the weapon?" Doyoon's sudden voice shook Joonseo out of his trance. Joonseo quickly answered that the weapon was ready, while also berating himself for getting distracted at such a time. He immediately went to create a dagger using an F-level creation. It's a basic creator's skill that utilizes the user's mana to create objects. The durability and quality of the item depend on the user's mana. As soon as the dagger was ready, Joonseo threw it hurriedly over to Doyoon. After receiving the dagger, Doyoon leapt forward and swung the dagger that was enveloped in a dark aura to the boss lunging ferociously at him. This, a rank skill, is called a shadow weapon, and it consumes a user's weapon to transform it into a shadow weapon. Its quality and mana will increase depending on the user's mana. After a certain amount of time, the weapon will vanish. One strike was all it took for the boss's head to be cleanly severed from its body. The head landed on the ground with a thud. The shadow weapon in Doyoon's hand disappeared after some time. Dongua asked the team if there was anyone who got hurt. Jimin replied that she was fine. Joonseo gave the party members an admiring look. He couldn't believe that each team member performed better than he was expecting. He was astonished at how flawless their teamwork was. He firmly believed that this guild would go far in the future. However, Joonseo also felt a tremendous bout of insecurities and couldn't help comparing his capability, which he felt was sorely lacking compared to the rest of the members. "I was only able to create one dagger. I couldn't help much at all," Joonseo thought to himself. He also silently berated himself for getting distracted during the fight. While clenching his fist, he questioned his worth and asked himself if he deserved to be with such an amazing team. Joonseo was forced to stop his pity party by the sound of Doyoon's voice. "Are you hurt anywhere?" To which Joonseo answered flusteredly that he wasn't and expressed how he hadn't been useful at all. When Juzeo laughed at himself deprecatingly, Doyoon cast him a strange look. He told Joonseo, "What are you talking about? I'll save so much money with your skill." He then utilized his mana to conjure his shadow weapon to drive his message home. "As you can see, my skill consumes weapons, so I wouldn't be able to afford it even if I were to buy the cheapest weapons out there." He further explained that he needed a creator class because it appeared that all he needed was a weapon containing mana to activate his shadow weapon skill. He gave Joonseo an appreciative look and enthusiastically congratulated him on the success of his first dungeon raid as a support. Joonseo's face brightened up when Doyoon tapped him on the shoulder and told him how he was looking forward to their next dungeon raid. He even lightly quipped that he shouldn't ditch them on their next raid. Dongua joined the two and told the group that they should start picking up the loot. He was then cut off in the middle of his sentence by a deafening rumble. The ground shook, making the party extremely flustered. Jimin exclaimed in trepidation, fearing the sudden movement was due to an earthquake. "The cave's not going to cave in because we defeated the boss, right?" Hyunwoo asked with uncertainty. Joonseo pointed to a certain direction of the cave and exclaimed that the wall was collapsing. Hyunwoo then raised his staff and used his mana to analyze the surrounding area. He found out that there seemed to be a portal connected to a different place. Doi-hoon appeared to be contemplative, while Do-won seemed to be fraught with anticipation for the prospect of finding a treasure. Doi-hoon gave the overly excited Do-won and Jimin a helpless look, while Hyun-woo tried to warn them not to enter the portal. When Doi-hoon asked Hyun-woo if his magic detected anything that was a cause for concern, Hyun-woo warily said no. Having gotten confirmation from Hyun-woo, Doi-hoon said not to be worried since the whole place shouldn't fall apart anyway, and that they were going to be quick about it. Someone in the background cheered after finally gaining permission to enter the dungeon from their guildmaster Doi-hoon. Despite feeling weary, Hyun-woo finally relented and sighed. Thus, the group entered the portal. Later, we're finally back at the scene that was previously seen in the prologue where Jeon-seo was running desperately for his life from the golem. Shit, how did this happen? Everyone's dead except for me. Jeon-seo was overwhelmed with the memories of the dead bodies of Do-won, Jimin, Hyun-woo, and Doi-hoon after being brutally killed and impaled by the golem. He thought despairingly that the golem shouldn't have been in a D-rank dungeon. He also had never heard of a monster that couldn't be detected by magic. Jeon-seo looked back in terror, only to find out that the monster had finally caught up to him. The golem punched him, making him fly away at a great distance. Blood gushed out from his mouth as he suffered from the attack. He told himself he needed to get up while trembling from the sheer effort. With a great resolve to survive, he summoned a dagger with all his remaining mana. After a few seconds, he was able to successfully create a dagger. Giving everything he had, he threw the dagger towards the golem. However, his efforts proved to be futile and ineffective against the monster. It only managed to enrage the monster further. The golem swung its fist again, ready to give Jeon-seo another beating. The strike caused the dungeon floor to finally give in, making Jeon-seo fall into the depths of the water. Jeon-seo thought about how everything had come to this. The hopelessness and despair he felt were palpable. His self-loathing evident as he stared into nothingness, eyes completely devoid of hope. He berated himself for being a D rank who couldn't even use basic buff skills such as healing. Scenes of the lively Do-won guild members flashed through his mind. I finally came across a guild that actually needed me, but I ended up running away and abandoning them. How pathetic. I bet someone else would have been more useful. With his eyes closed and still immersed in hopelessness, Jeon-seo regretted that he had become an awakened, and that he would never be able to have his wish realized. You have discovered XXXXX's spring. Complete. You have fulfilled the conditions to become a player. Hearing the robotic sound, Jeon-seo abruptly opened his eyes wide. A blinding light burst forth from his body, leaving Jeon-seo's mouth agape in astonishment. Another system prompt popped up. Welcome, player Shin Jeon-seo Nim. This is the end of the first chapter. The next chapter can be viewed on the playlist. We hope to see you on the next one. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell for more interesting donghua, manhua, and anime recap.